Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, helping you to find jargon-free information before choosing a professional to help solve your problems and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stuart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Divorce conversation. And during this segment of the show, I have family law attorney Robyn Ross, who is the owner of Ross Calandrillo, LLC in Mountainside, New Jersey. Now, Robyn will be talking to you today about divorcing in 2023, a checklist to prepare and organize ahead of a divorce in the new year. So, if you are out there and you're looking for jargon-free information before taking on any form of professional help, you may just want to stop what you're doing, find a quiet spot where you won't be disturbed, and listen in to what Robyn has to share with you today. So with that said, it has taken us weeks and weeks and weeks to get Robyn on the show, so I'm not going to keep her waiting a moment longer. She's a very busy lady. Welcome to the show, Robyn.
Oh, thank you so much. And sorry for the weeks and weeks and weeks, but hopefully it'll be worth it.
Well, you know what they say, the best things are always worth waiting for, right? So, hey, Nothing ever comes before the time. So, Robyn, before we jump in with the first question, it goes without saying that anything you share with us today is not any form of legal or therapeutic advice or even any kind of legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of sharing information. Now, would you just take a moment to expand on that in your own words so we're emphatically clear about what we're trying to achieve today?
Of course. The purpose of my conversation here today is just to provide some very general advice to your listeners. It does not create an attorney-client relationship. Every situation is different, which means that some of the things I say today may not be relevant to your particular situation. So it really is important that you speak to an attorney on your own, whether it's me or someone else, to make sure that you're getting advice that is very specific to your own situation.
Thank you for that, Robyn. So let's get started with our very first question. Could you just briefly describe your company, the people who you serve, and the various types of situations that they find themselves in when they come to you for your help?
Of course. So the name of my firm is Ross Calandrillo. We are a full-service family law firm located in Mountainside, New Jersey, and our practice is dedicated to family law. And that's all aspects of family law, even though we're talking divorce here today. But that's anything that comes into the family court docket. So that can be custody issues, adoptions, could be domestic violence situations, anything that would be dealt with in family court. Our firm will help with that. And the people that seek us out are typically in a place where they're in a time of family transition, which basically just means their family needs to look different than it does right now. That might mean a divorce, that might mean a change in custody situations, but they need to move themselves forward so that they're in a different family dynamic than they are at the time that they come to see us. And one of the reasons that I'm talking about things that you may need to do to be prepared for a divorce in the new year, or really at any time, but it just felt very timely now that we're in December, is because many of the times when people come to consult with me, it's they really just want to know what they should be doing and what they should expect. So that's something that we help them with in our consultations.
So, Robyn, there's a lot of information out there surrounding the overall topic of divorce. But in your experience, what's one or two common misconceptions that you come across on a day-to-day basis surrounding the industry that you serve?
So you've probably heard this one a lot, but I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I see is people thinking that they don't need an attorney to get divorced. And I know that sounds a bit self-serving because everyone will say, of course, you'll say you need an attorney. But, it is a common misconception because it's technically true. You don't have to have a lawyer in order to go through the divorce process. It's not required. You don't have the right to an attorney the way that you do in the criminal system. When people say, you have a right to an attorney, you don't have that in the divorce system. But, the reality is that people just think that they can do it themselves. I like to liken it to a doctor, right? If you go to a doctor and you need surgery, nobody would ever dream in a million years of saying, you know what, I'm just going to do this heart surgery myself. Nobody would ever think to do that. It sounds ridiculous, but people do it all the time when they're getting divorced. And the reason why this is a misconception, and I do understand why people would feel that way, is that the system is so complicated. I almost think that it's built to be confusing to lay people. Even if you have the simplest divorce, I did have someone come to me, they had everything figured out. Everything was agreed upon. They just couldn't figure out how to actually get the complaint filed or how to get the judgment back to them. So the system itself is complicated, and you really do need somebody with expertise to help you. And if you don't have a simple divorce, the law is very complicated. The laws are different in every state. So what someone tells you that happened to them, maybe you have a friend in California, and you hear about their divorce, it's going to be very different than what may happen to you in New Jersey. So you really have to get somebody who knows the specialized area of law and knows what's happening in your particular state so that you can know what it is that you should expect from the divorce process.
What would be some of the benefits of being prepared for the divorce process?
So, one of my favorite quotes is, failing to plan is planning to fail. Right. So you do have to plan for anything that you're going to do. And a divorce is such a huge life-changing event. It's one of the biggest life-changing events that people have. Death, divorce, these are big transitions in someone's life. So, for you to plan for that process is essential. Number one, it makes the process easier. It helps your attorney to actually be able to answer the questions to help you. Some of the things that I put on my preparation checklist are things like making sure that you have all of the documents ahead of time when you're planning for a divorce, tax returns, income information, credit, even, something as simple as maybe opening a credit card in your own name ahead of time. All of these things can help your attorney, because if you were to come to me to ask, what can I expect as far as child support? What can I expect as far as alimony? I can't answer those questions if you don't have any income information. And you would be so surprised at how many people come to me and have no idea how much their spouse earns, have no idea what their household income looks like. And then they're confused as to why I can't answer questions as to what the expectation should be for their financial picture going forward. Well, if you don't know your current financial picture, your attorney really can't answer questions about your future financial picture. So that preparedness is really key. And one of the things that we do during our consultations that we always go over are, what can you expect during the divorce process, and what might things look like when you come out at the other end? So, we don't have a crystal ball. Obviously, we can't tell you maybe to the penny how much money you're getting, or what custody may look like. But if you give us accurate information, usually we can give you, a range based upon our experience on what things may look like down the road. Now, if you're not giving us full, accurate information, and one example I'll give is, somebody may say, well, what might custody look like for me? What can I expect for the kids? But then they kind of keep from me, by the way, I have a drug problem. Well, if you keep that from me, my answer is going to change quite a bit, right? So accurate information is really, really important in that regard. But as long as I'm given accurate information, I can usually, at least give a projection of what some of the expectations may be, so that you're prepared for what your future is going to look like.
Right. So the divorce process itself is quite daunting. You deal with it on a day-to-day basis, but for somebody who, they got married, they fell in love, they got married, and then for whatever reasons, unfortunately, they find themselves in a situation where they thinking about divorce, they're considering it, they're on the cusp of it, and it's almost tantamount to standing at the bottom of a mountain and then looking at the top and thinking, how in the world am I going to get there? How can I prepare for this? How can I be organized for this divorce process? With that said, what are some of the fears that hold people back from doing the things that they need to do to be prepared, to get organized for that daunting process?
Well, I think that the most common fear that I've seen is that once you start divorce planning, and divorce planning has a bad connotation. People always think that means that you're going to move money or hide funds or do something, that's a little bit, untoward in a way. That's not what that means. What that really means is just getting your ducks in a row. And I think that one of the biggest fears about getting your ducks in a row for a divorce is that emotional component, is that once you start to prepare and you start to get the documents that you need and gather information, it becomes quite real. And a lot of people are just not ready for divorce to be real. That's one of the reasons that, sometimes people are hesitant to even have a consultation with an attorney. It makes it real of, oh my God, I'm getting divorced. Oh my God, I'm sitting in an attorney's office. Oh no, I'm gathering tax returns and credit card statements and insurance information and doing all of these things, that really means that this divorce is actually happening. So, I think it's a very real fear, and I definitely understand it. I tell people all the time when they come to speak to me that you speaking to me doesn't mean you have to get divorced. Sometimes people think that. Once I talk to an attorney, that's it. I have to get divorced. I have to go through with it. You don't. All you're doing is gathering information and being ready and understanding what to expect so that you can make an informed decision. And understand that, one of the ways you can overcome that is just by knowing that anything you do can be undone. Just because you speak to an attorney doesn't mean you actually have to file a complaint for divorce. Just because you start gathering documentation to prepare yourself for, the information that you're going to need or what your future might look like, when you go from we to me to steal someone else's terminology. And that's Jody Topix. I want to give her credit for that. She came up with that term. But when you start to do that, it actually, by getting that information or getting, speaking to an attorney or gathering the documentation, it actually may help you to make the decision by, one, understanding that maybe the future doesn't look as scary as you thought it was going to look once everything is in front of you. Or once you start the process and you speak to an attorney and start getting documents, and you may say, you know what, I've decided I don't want to get divorced after all, and that's okay too. The choice is always in your hands to decide what you think is the best for you and your family.
So, Robyn, earlier you mentioned some of the consequences of holding back crucial information and what kind of an impact that would have on the kind of service that you could provide for a client. So, with that said, then, what are some of the pitfalls that one must be aware of when you are setting out to embark on this divorce, this thing what we call the divorce process, and getting organized, being prepared for it? What are some of the common pitfalls you see people fall into and should avoid?
So I think, especially when it comes to divorce preparedness and planning, we're usually talking more about financial. It's very difficult to, prepare for some of the other aspects, like the custody issues. That's going to be a little bit more of just what's in the best interest of the children. There's no real way to prepare for that. You can't, coach your children to do one thing or another, and it's not advised to do that, at all. But when it comes to the financial piece, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that they can actually get away with hiding money or hiding accounts. And that if they do things and they move money around before they actually file a complaint for divorce, that they'll be able to get away with that. And the reason that's a big pitfall is that, yes, there are some really brilliant people out there that may be able to get away with that, but 99% of time, the average American, or anyone really, is not going to be able to hide money that nobody's going to find. The lawyers are going to find it. If we can't find it, we're going to engage forensic accountants that are going to find it. So if you're trying to be shady with the money and hide accounts and, hide assets, it really just means that your divorce process is going to be longer and more expensive. And it means that once you're caught, and you are almost always going to be caught, the court's going to find that you're acting in bad faith, and it's going to cost you more money because they may punish you either by making you pay your spouse's legal fees for having to go searching for this money. There may be an unequal distribution of the assets to make your spouse whole. And that also may mean that a divorce process that could have taken a couple months may now take years because of the fact that you tried to hide money and get away with certain things. So, what I would say is just don't do it. Most attorneys are not going to help you engage in that type of behavior. And if you do tell an attorney that there are accounts or assets that the other party doesn't know about, the attorney is going to make you disclose them.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate here then, Robyn. What if I'm in a situation where I'm the person who feels I have the right to that money? They didn't work, or, it was my business, or whatever the case may be. And irrespective of what my attorney is advising me, and in terms of the law, my emotions are getting the better of me. And I still go down that road of think, this is my right. I'm going to hold on to it. I'm not going to tell my attorney. Just how detrimental can those emotions be? Not just in this particular scenario, but throughout the whole divorce process and in your experience. I'm sure you've seen people's emotions kind of spill over and, have a negative impact on the whole process. What would you like to share on that point?
Oh, there are so many things I'd like to share.
I know.
I'll try to keep it to one or two, though.
Go ahead.
So the first thing is that if your emotions are spilling over to such a level that you're not listening to the advice of your attorney, that probably means that you didn't find the right attorney. You have to find an attorney that you trust so much that you will disclose even that information to your attorney, and that you will feel comfortable enough listening to your attorney's advice, because our job is to overcome the emotion. I tell my clients all the time, your job is to be emotional, and my job is to see past that emotion. It's to advise you, not on an emotional level. If we're all sitting in my office crying, I'm not accomplishing anything. But you go ahead and cry, and my job is to tell you what you need to do to actually navigate this process, putting the emotion aside. So that's number one, is that tells me a little bit about the relationship that you may have with your attorney if you feel that you're not even going to share that information with your attorney. Because if you did, your attorney would tell you all of the pitfalls that you may have, not only during the divorce process of being sanctioned by the court for hiding assets, being found to be acting in bad faith. There could be a lot of punitive damages even awarded by the court. But one of the biggest things that people don't understand is that if that money or those assets, which you may very rightfully believe that your spouse is not entitled to because you worked for them, but if they are disclosed down the line, even after the divorce process is done, it could undo your entire divorce, which means your spouse can come back in and reopen the whole thing years later because there were assets that were not disclosed, which means you're now going through this divorce process again. And who wants to do that? I think doing it once is enough.
Yeah, definitely.
So having to go through the whole thing again and reopen the entire divorce process simply because there were assets that you willfully hid during the process, that's probably the hardest thing. And I tell my clients that all the time when they come to me and say, well, I do have this asset and I don't want to disclose it. I say, well, here's why. You could hide the asset. I'm not going to help you do it, which means you now have to get another attorney because that goes against my ethics to do things like that.
Sure.
But if you do choose to do that, what that could mean is that 5 years from now, when you're happily divorced and someone finds that there was this asset that you knew of and chose not to disclose, the whole thing could be reopened. So do you really want to go through that?
Wow.
Typically, the answer is no.
Wow. So in short, disclose everything to your attorney.
Please, if you take anything away from this show, tell your attorney everything and let your attorney make the decision about how to then position that information. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but, some people say that attorneys are professional liars, and I take offense to that because we're actually not allowed to lie. It's against all of the rules of ethics that we have to have candor to the court and, candor to our adversaries. So I'm not allowed to lie. But my job is that I can position information in a way that's going to be most favorable to you. So I can try to make an argument as to why that business that you work so hard for that you think your spouse shouldn't be entitled to. My job is to come up with the arguments as to why that should be, but I still have to disclose the business.
Right.
Or I still have to disclose the asset, but I can argue for you as to why you should be entitled to keep it.
Yeah, you blew me away when something you said earlier, that the client can be emotional, but it's your job to see past the emotions, right? Something along those lines.
Oh, yeah.
And that for me just flies in the face of this perception of attorneys being just so cold and just thinking about the money and just being these inaccessible human beings, because in reality, even though you are not, as the attorney, not getting emotional, you're operating from a place of care, right? If you're just seeing the facts of what's being presented in front of you, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because we have to stop people from making emotional decisions. I think that we all know decisions that we make based purely on emotion, 9 times out of 10 are not the right decision. Just think about the last time that you've gotten really angry about something and maybe called somebody and left them an angry voicemail or sent that email in the midst of anger, and then once you read the email again the next day, you go,
"Oh dear,
really shouldn't have sent that."
Oh dear,
I really wish I wouldn't have sent that. So the problem is when you make knee-jerk decisions that are based purely on emotion, many times it's the wrong decision. So we as attorneys have to couple that emotional part, because your emotions are important. The things that are emotionally important to you, that there is something to be said for that. I had a client, by way of example, who was very emotionally attached to his airline miles. I don't know why he was so emotionally attached to his airline miles, but they were really important to him. So I have to keep those things in mind. but I have to keep your emotional, attachments and the things that are emotionally important to you and find a way to fit them into, the legality, into that legal box to try to get you what you want, but to do it in a way that makes sense, in a way that is legal and equitable. And that hopefully will be, best for you, best for your family, best for your kids. I have to think about all of those things at the same time, whereas you only have to think about your emotions. And that's okay. That's my job.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for that, Robyn. Now, I think you could talk about that topic all day long.
I bet.
I bet. So, Robyn, in terms of, let's say some of the perceived obstacles that might be preventing people out there from seeking the help of a professional like yourself, name me 2 or 3 of those perceived obstacles that you come across on a regular basis.
So the number one obstacle probably won't surprise you, and that's cost. It's that attorneys are typically more expensive than people think that they're going to be, and they're just not prepared for the legal expense involved with a divorce. There's a sense of sticker shock sometimes when, I talk to people about what the actual retainer cost is going to be. And, I know that your listeners are from all different areas, but I can speak specifically of New Jersey. But in New Jersey, if you're looking for an experienced divorce attorney, they're going to cost anywhere from $300 to $600 an hour, sometimes more. So if you figure that, you have an attorney who's in that mid-range, let's say $450 an hour, 10 hours of attorney time is $4,500. And most divorces, even more simple of divorces, usually can't be completed in 10 hours. So you're talking about thousands of dollars that a lot of times people just aren't prepared to pay. And that's fair. That's a very real situation. I think if you go into an attorney's office and they say to you, give me a $10,000 retainer. Hey, most average people don't have $10,000 just lying around. So they can go, sure, put $10,000, take it. I don't need it. I won't miss it. So that's a very, very real obstacle. And the way that we help people try to overcome the price issue is, like most attorneys, we take multiple forms of payment. So if you need to put it on a credit card, that's okay. Unlike some attorneys, we actually do allow you to break up the payment into a payment plan. So if you want to pay a little bit at a time, we allow you to do that. And then there are other options of, securing financing. There are some companies out there that specifically handle legal expense financing or getting loans in order to get the retainer paid. But I do think that you should speak to the attorney that you're consulting with about what the finances are going to look like, what the options are, and what it is that they are and are not willing to accept. Because if you were to do something like take out a loan against a retirement account, many times you can only do that one time. So, you really want to talk to the attorney about what it is that you plan to do. And there are times that people will come to me and say, well, I plan to withdraw the money from my retirement account. And I may say to them, well, that's not a good idea. And here's why. You're going to have penalties. You're going to pay taxes. There may be things that you don't know. So just have an open conversation with the attorney about what the financial struggles are. And they may have some ideas as to how you can overcome them.
When it comes to planning for divorce and Robyn, and obviously keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, could you please share an example of how you've been able to succeed in gaining the results that a particular client of yours were looking for when they initially reached out for you?
Oh, yeah. So one story that comes to mind quite readily is I had a client that consulted with me, and she was clearly in an abusive marriage. So that takes a lot more planning if you're going to extract yourself from an abusive marriage. And one of the things that I talk to clients when there's clearly domestic violence issues, and sometimes the client doesn't even know that there are domestic violence issues. They just start to talk to me, and I start to see certain indicators that, maybe this is a situation that there is some abuse. And one of the things I always recommend is to come up with a written safety plan. And I put the client in contact with any of the local organizations that may help with, creating a safety plan and creating a safe situation for victims and or survivors of domestic violence. So with this particular client, I helped her to come up with a written safety plan. I helped her to engage with mental health professionals for both herself and her children. And those are all things that are on my checklist is, are you safe if you leave? And coming up with a safety plan and coming up with, mental health experts, professional therapists for both you and your children, and having a crisis plan ready. And then also just speaking of the emotional piece, one of the things that was really important to her was to make sure that the custody situation was one that was in the best interest of the children based upon the behavior of her husband. And it was really, really important for her to keep the marital home. So we had to work with the finances to make sure that that was something that she could do, that she could meet those financial obligations. And when all was said and done, it took a couple years to get her divorced because it took some time for her to be ready and to have those safety plans and those all of those moving parts in place. But when all was said and done, she did get divorced. She was happy with the custody arrangement. She was able to stay in the marital home. We found out a way for her to buy out her husband's interest in the marital property and to do it in a way where she would still be financially secure in the future. And, she's one of those situations that even though it took a lot of time and a lot of planning, a lot of detailed step-by-step things that had to be done ahead of time before we could get her divorced, she did get divorced, and she did it in a way that, those things that were really important to her, that we were able to make that happen.
As a reminder, my guest today is family law attorney Robyn Ross, who has been addressing the topic of divorcing in 2023, a checklist to prepare and organize ahead of a divorce in the new year. Now then, Robyn, you've shared some great insights so far. So let's just flip the script for a moment and talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
What was it that inspired you? What led you to do what you do today?
So I've wanted to be an attorney since I was about 7 years old.
Wow.
Which is kind of interesting because you would think that, your career goals and life plans that you make at 7 usually aren't going to pan out. Before that, I wanted to be a fireman, so that didn't work. So divorce attorney did work. Firefighter didn't work. But I think what inspired me to do it is, I always tell people I was watching a television show, but I probably shouldn't have been watching at 7 or 8, and it was called LA Law.
Oh, yeah,
and
I remember that.
It was just about attorneys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people will go, "You were watching that at 7?" Okay, I probably shouldn't have been. But it was about attorneys, and I just thought that it was the coolest thing, like watching these people go into court and argue and fight for people. So I've always known that that's what I wanted to do. And if you ask my mother, I went in and I fought for why my sister and I should get separate bedrooms when we were kids. I had evidence, I was ready. But I think specifically why I wanted to do family law is, as cliched and corny as it sounds, I went to law school to help people. I got into this profession to help people. And I was trying some different areas of law that were a little bit more business-based. And I just didn't feel like I was helping anyone. I felt like I was helping big companies, and that's just not what I wanted to do. So I said to myself, well, what can I do where I have a lot more client contact? And I really feel like I'm helping actual people. And then I said, well, why don't I try family law? So I kind of just fell into it and said, let me give it a try. And I started it and I loved it. And it's one of those areas of law that either you love doing it or you hate doing it, right away. I knew right away that I loved it and that I really loved helping people and being able to see the impact that I was making on a person or a family, in real time. That, having people come back and say to me, you helped me through this incredibly difficult time, and I don't think that I could have done it without you. That's really rewarding for me.
So on any given day, when you rise in the morning and you have a full day's work ahead of you helping the people who you work with, you've already said that, you get a lot of satisfaction from that, but how does Robyn Ross feel on a day like that when she's got, maybe 5 or 6 clients to see on a day, full day's work ahead, and each and every one of them have individual scenarios to be addressed? How do you feel on a day like that, Robyn?
So, when I wake up, I'm usually really energized and charged,
mm-hmm.
which anybody who works in my office will tell you. Like, I come in on 10. That's always the running joke.
I start on 5, so you and I could not work in the same office. We'd have to have separate rooms.
No, but I will tell you by about 4:00 p.m. I'm about on 2.
Okay.
I'm not on 10. I'm not on 10 anymore. But, you start really energized because you think like, wow, I'm going to accomplish so many things today. And I have this full day and I know that I'm going to go to bed with some sense of satisfaction. Sometimes you can have, depending on what's on the calendar, you may have a level of anxiety. There may be times where I go like, oh my God, I have this, this huge case that I'm dealing with today and I need to do A, B, C, or D. But I think that anxiety is a good thing. one of the very first bosses I had when I first started practicing family law said to me, if you go into a situation or you go into a courtroom or you are, about to face your day and you don't have some level of nervousness, then you're doing it wrong out of the field. That means you don't care anymore.
Exactly.
If you can just wake up and go, all right, I have 5 or 6 clients that, what I do today may or may not change their entire life. Who cares? Then that's not really the right attitude. You should have a little bit of a sense of, that nervous energy of let me make sure I'm doing this the right way, because what you're doing has real impact on people. This is not fake life. It's real life for people.
Mm.
So, the reality is, being a little bit, nervous and maybe being on 10 and maybe saying, okay, how am I going to accomplish all of these things I need to do today? I think that means I'm still doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Something, Robyn, you sound so good. I think I'm going to file for divorce just so I can be your,
Don't do that.
just so I can be your client. Now, how does that sound? Not recommended.
Well, let's hope not. I never want to encourage. I never want to recommend divorce. But if it's happening anyway, call me.
Let me just say for the record, I'm a happily married man. And I only say those things when my wife is outside of the house because I would be in trouble. You gotta have fun. You gotta have fun, haven't you? But on a more serious side, I alluded to this before you came on the show, but I'd just like to share that with anybody who's listening in right now. From my perspective, because you just spoke a little bit about yourself and what inspired you, I was inspired to start this particular series called Let's Talk Divorce because I myself was a child of divorce and I experienced a very violent, a very bloody, a very volatile separation between my parents, and I was only about 8 to 9 years old. And little did I know at that particular time that the impact of that separation would have an impact on me throughout my adulthood. It had an impact on my teenagers, the results I had in my exams, the professions that I chose earlier on in life as a young man, the relationships, the kinds of relationships I had with people of the opposite sex. And, all the way until I was about 40, that's when I started to look at, Stuart, why are you doing these things in this particular way? Why do why are you not being the best version of yourself? And it wasn't until I had some form of therapy that I realized, or I learned, that a lot of the things that were impacting me so later on in life were a result of my parents' separation. So with that, I started this series, Let's Talk Divorce, to bring on experts like yourself in the hope that the information that you impart will inspire listeners out there who have children, who may be in that volatile situation where children are involved and they're caught up in the middle and those children don't have a voice. I like to call them the invisible voices. I invite people like yourself on the show so that if there are listeners out there and there are, at loggerheads with each other and they may have every right to be. So, maybe, they're in a situation where their partner has done something really, really, wrongful to them. However, the children are not to blame. So my hope is that if you are listening in right now and you're in a partnership with someone, whether you're married or you're just living together and there are children involved, that you, for the sake of the children, that you do what I always like to say, love your children more than you hate each other right now. Because they pick up, and I'm sure you can expand on this yourself, Robyn, even though you may think you're hiding everything from the children, they pick up on every single nuance. Is that correct, Robyn, in your experience?
Oh, my goodness. Children are incredibly smart. They are incredibly smart and astute. And, they know what's going on. So, the reality is if you think that you are, on the phone in the kitchen with your friend, bad mouthing your, soon to be ex-husband or soon to be ex-wife, and the children aren't hearing that, they absolutely are. They know what you're saying. You have to keep that energy away from your children. And what I tell my clients all the time is, and sometimes it shocks them to hear this. I said, if there are children involved, if you have kids and you're getting divorced, Everyone cares about the kids more than you. The judge doesn't care about you. I don't care about you. We all care about the kids. So that can be kind of hard to hear from your own attorney.
Wow,
I care about your kids more than I care about you.
Yeah.
But it's very, very true that at the end of the day, our role, my role as an officer of the court, the role of the court in and of itself is to protect the children at all costs. So we're always going to do that, and we're going to put the interests of your children over your interests every single time. So I think once they understand that and they know that that's the way this court system is going to work, they're going to realize that everything that we do, even if it just sounds like we're just talking about money and finances and support and the house and who's keeping what, in the backdrop of all of that is what is in the best interest of the children. And that's what the court's going to be looking at whenever there are children involved. And that's one of the reasons, too, that in my preparedness checklist, I talk about not only getting a therapist for yourself to deal with how are you going to deal with the fallout of divorce, but sometimes that therapist can help you to deal with how do you prepare your children for the fallout of divorce, what you should or should not be doing around the children, how you talk to the children about divorce. And sometimes I even recommend that you start looking for therapists for the children as well, so that they have somebody that they can speak to during the divorce process, especially when, mom and dad are at odds. And it's so sad to just hear about the divorce that you went through as a child. But, just imagine if you had somebody that you could talk to about what was going on and that you knew was a safe space for you. That might have changed a lot of things for you going forward. So I always recommend it and say, if you think that this is going to be a particularly acrimonious divorce, it's a good idea to start to get in place somebody for your children to talk to also, because they're not going to feel like they can safely speak to you about how they feel, or maybe to your spouse about how they feel. They may think that they, will be disappointing of one parent or the other if they talk about how they truly feel, or that they'll be asked to take sides. So I always think it's just important to make sure that you are maintaining some safeguards or putting in place some safeguards for the emotional and mental health of your children while you're going through this process.
Preach, Sister Robyn, preach.
You always seem to find the topics that I can go on and on about. I don't know how you do that, Stuart, but you managed to do it.
It's just something that's so close to my heart, and I've spoken with hundreds of professionals like yourself who serve the divorce industry, and it is something that when you sit down with somebody, you realize that, and even if they're not directly affected by divorce, indirectly, I think everybody I know somehow being affected by divorce. Right. The figures are huge. Unfortunately increasing, not decreasing, especially after the pandemic. Yeah. It is a topic that we could sit down and talk about for days and days on end. I'm just so glad that you found the time to come and speak with me about it. I feel privileged.
Well, I really appreciate you having me and taking the time to track me down for weeks and weeks. So I do appreciate that.
Really naughty. Well, very naughty of you.
I know.
So listen, Robyn, in terms of people listening in right now, if they're out there and they do find themselves in that position where they are looking for a professional like yourself, what are some of the things that they should be evaluating when they're looking to take on the services of a family law attorney?
So, here in New Jersey, we have something called matrimonial certification, and that's great for you to be a certified matrimonial law attorney. But there's some great attorneys that aren't certified. I think one of the things to look out for are just the level of experience. You do want to ask how much experience they have in that area. There are some people that we call dabblers, which means they do like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I do say sometimes you want to avoid those people. You want somebody who really does dedicate their practice to family law, because it is a lot more complicated than it looks like on the outside. So if there's somebody who really doesn't know much about it and says, I do a divorce or two a year, that may not be the person that you want, especially if you have a rather complicated divorce. If it's a bit simpler, then by all means, that would be fine. That's one of the things that you want to look for. I really think experience. I think somebody who's just like-minded. When you sit down and have a consultation with an attorney, you understand that you are in some ways interviewing that attorney, and that attorney is interviewing you, which means that everyone has to make sure that it's a good fit. So you want to feel comfortable with the attorney that you're speaking with. You want to make sure that their style is aligned with yours. By way of example, if you want someone really, really aggressive and you find that the attorney is not so aggressive, that's not a good fit. Find somebody who's aligned with what you want. At the same time, the attorney's interviewing you. There have definitely been times I've had consultations with people and I said, this is not the right fit. I'm not the right attorney for you. And that's okay. There are many attorneys out there. So I think just an evaluation, you want to make sure that you feel good about this person because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them. You're going to be telling them all of the, your innermost secrets, everything about your life. You want to have a level of comfort with that person and know that you feel like you're in good hands. As far as what you might want to watch out for is I think during that consultation, you want to watch out for maybe people that are making lofty one-sided promises or saying things that are unreasonable, like, we're going to bury him and he'll be living in a refrigerator box under the bridge. Probably not. So that means that they're telling you things that probably won't happen, or things like, your wife will never see the kids again. Not going to happen. Of course, you're really going to make it such that one parent is not ever allowed to see the children ever again. So that means that attorney's kind of selling you a bill of goods, and you might want to walk in the other direction.
Finally, then, Robyn, we are running out of time. If somebody is out there and they would like to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do that? That's one, I'll say part one. And part two is when they do reach out to you, what actually happens? Are you going to hit them over the head with a Fred Flintstone club and drag them to the back of your office and steal all the money out of their handbags?
Stuart, how did you know? That's exactly what
want
happened.
to know. I've read about it online, Robyn. You're just all over. You've got this awful reputation for doing that. But anyway.
Yes, me and my Flintstone clubbing. That's exactly how it happened.
There you go.
The easiest way to contact me would be by telephone, which is simply to call my office, and that number is area code 908-543-4800. Once you call my office, they will schedule a consultation with me or with a member of my team, depending on availability and what your needs are. And then the consultation will take place either by telephone or by Zoom. We are starting slowly, post-pandemic to do in-person consultations again. Sometimes it's necessary because of privacy reasons. People really just need to come into the office and consult with us, and we can accommodate that as well. And after you schedule that consultation, it is a paid consultation, so you do have to pay a nominal fee for the consultation, but you will get a half an hour to have all of your questions answered, for me to go through the process, set expectations. And typically within that half an hour, people leave and go, wow, I've gotten so much information, including, legal strategy, which you can take with you if you choose not to retain me. I've already told you what my strategy would be, and you have that information. You can use that if you'd like to use it. But that's what you're getting for that 30-minute consultation. Or you could go to our website, which is www.rcfamilylawyers.com. And there you can either start a chat to have a consultation scheduled. The chat won't give you any legal advice or answer any specific questions, but it will just tell you how our office can get in contact with you. And there are also some great videos on our website that answer some very, typical frequently asked questions in video format that you can watch. Or if you're looking for information, you could go to my YouTube channel where I also post 60-second tips about, regularly asked divorce questions. And that YouTube channel is at Robyn Ross 3082. Or follow me on Instagram at Robyn Ross ESQ. So there's a bunch of ways to get in contact with me. But if you want a consultation, best way is to call the office or to hit up our website.
So no Fred Flintstone Club?
No, there's no Fred Flintstone Club. It's really just a conversation and a lot of information. Go figure. That's all you're getting if you contact my office. A bunch of information.
Well, thanks for sharing all of those contact details with us, Robyn. I think I heard you mention earlier during our conversation something about a planning checklist. Now, is that something that can be downloaded or something?
So it is not something that can be downloaded, but it will be given to you if you contact our office for a consultation. We can provide you with a written checklist of everything that you need by email in a PDF format or whatever's most convenient for you. So that is something that we do offer to anyone that contacts our office for a consultation. It's kind of like a bonus prize. You get to speak to us for a half an hour and you get a checklist upon request so that you can have in written format everything that you need to get ready for a divorce.
Fantastic. Okay, that is all we have time for today, ladies and gentlemen. You have been listening to family law attorney Robyn Ross. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Robyn. You have certainly demonstrated that you are a true educator and advocate for your client's success. So thank you.
Pleasure has been all mine, Stuart. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome, my dear. And I'd also like to take a moment to say a big thank you to you. Yes, our listener. Without you, we wouldn't have anybody to talk to. And Robyn and I would be sat here twiddling our little thumbs. So thank you also for taking the time out of your busy day and for joining us on what I can only describe as an informative conversation with one of the leading family law attorneys in Mountainside, New Jersey today. Again, her name is Robyn Ross. Make sure you do check her out, because if there's one thing that I'm absolutely emphatically sure about after listening to Robyn today, is that you're going to be in a good place to get started. So that's it for today. Again, my name is Stuart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading divorce professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Divorce Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and always remember to love your children more than you hate each other.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.